Yeah, you know what? We're gonna make this like a video number 2 is because I tried to record this the first time and I couldn't exactly get my thoughts out. And it's better when a video comes out naturally and I just speak my 2 cents on what I think is going on or the way I think things should be. And sometimes when you let the ideas flow naturally, good things come out of it. But, you probably noticed by the title of this video is that without order, some people just fall apart. And this is something, again, you will not hear from anybody else. You will not hear it from, any really political circle explain this phenomenon. And so an interesting thing is everyone's concerned about what young men are doing. It's no hidden secret that young men, play a vital role in politics, whether or not we'd like to believe it. And because at the end of the day, right, when it comes to how politics goes, you can look at the Fascist Party of Italy. I was watching a video. I was watching The Son of the Century. It was about Mussolini. And the intro scene, it's like a video on YouTube, where there were a bunch of young men in their early 20s who had been through World War I. And, they were basically, it was after World War I, and, Mussolini was starting his fascist party. These young men, were seen as flunkies, outcasts, outsiders. They weren't even given pensions for fighting in literally one of the most historically brutal wars in all of human history. At the time, it was just another war, but people were not really aware of how brutal mechanized warfare was. And there was a lot of young, traumatized men who had seen horrors that nobody else had seen, and people just didn't take it seriously. And so the thing is that, a common problem I've always seen is because I've been around a lot of military, families and, those circles, is that when you get somebody who drops out of the military or, they get into the civilian life again, it's an interesting transition. And so when they get out, they're so used to having an orderly lifestyle, they fall apart. They get into drugs, they do alcohol, they, stay up late and they get up late, probably around 3 p.m. and they just, can't hold a job and they're always smoking pot. It doesn't really matter or that sorts of stuff, right? And, with this Fascist Party of Italy, I came to the realization, a truth that I've known for years, probably since 2017, maybe 2018, is that for some people, without order, they just fall apart. And it's a part of, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people. A lot of people don't want to admit this part about humanity. The need to be a part of a greater group, a bigger group, a greater idea, to serve a greater purpose. And I see this more in young men than I do in women. Maybe it's just because of the fact that maybe men are just naturally more collectivist and women are more individualist. I don't know. But I've noticed there's a tendency. Now, I am not one of those people. I obviously, you can put me by myself, live on my own, and I'm not going to get into drugs. I'm not going to smoke pot. It's just not my interest. I'm not going to get heavily drunk and, become an alcoholic. It's just not my thing. Because I know what I want out of life. I am a driven person that is willing to do what I need to do to get what I want out of life. I can import an order upon myself to make sure that I don't fall apart. But there's a lot of people that can't do that. And so the Fascist Party, while they're saying their little Arditi thing, which is basically the Italian version of the German stormtroopers, wearing uniforms of the military, where in modern polite society, in the putrid peace time, these people are flunked losers. They're, by modern society, they're not even given pensions. They are seen as disposable tools that, once their task of destroying the enemy in war is over, they have no place in society. And honestly, anybody with, common sense can realize that, oh, you have a bunch of, young, pent-up male rage of men in their early 20s who have combat experience in one of the worst wars, how this would not be a disaster where you've disenfranchised a large swath of young military-age men. I'm sorry, but that's a recipe for disaster. But that was just common after World War I. Most people after World War I estimated the horrors of World War I. And so a lot of them joined these fascist parties, these ultra-nationalist parties, because in a sort of way they believe they were stabbed in the back by pacifists and moralists. And so, they had a gripe against these people. They were looked down upon by people who didn't even want to fight in the war. And ironically enough, Hitler was attracted to nationalist politics because of this fact too. That's the reason why he was attracted to Mussolini, is because he saw this, ragtag, rebel group of disenfranchised, veterans who were pissed off that the society that they fought for had betrayed them. That's a lot of the policies behind the Nazis. And so the thing about it, I've noticed with it, especially with young men, is that without order being imposed upon their life, without some kind of greater purpose to serve, they just fall apart. I've seen this countless times with people who get out of the military. Hell, even the Air Force Academy, for that matter, is that when they get out of the Air Force Academy, if you ever look at videos of the Air Force Academy about how they're told exactly what time they're supposed to get up, what they're supposed to do, what time they're supposed to have breakfast, what time they're supposed to study, what time they're supposed to do this, that, and that, okay? These people, when they get out of those positions, oh, they go apeshit. They as soon as they get the taste of freedom, they start doing things that that are just wild to anybody else. Is because partially they're just so used to being told every day of their life exactly what they're supposed to do without question or thought or protest, that when that order that is no longer imposed upon them disappears, they fall apart. That's an interesting thing. That's a food for thought discussion I want you to think about, because you will never hear this from anybody else. None of the mainstream politicians will ever talk about this aspect of human nature. And I've recognized it too. I like when you're building homes for the homeless, or you're going for a 5K run with the group, there's a unique feeling that gives you more energy when you're serving a greater cause beyond yourself that energizes you in such a way that you won't get doing it as an individual. And that is a very powerful motivating force. Most people don't like to admit it. Ironically enough, is that to go against this cultural norm, people will chastise you. To be a part of the minority against the majority, right? People will try and humble you and make you fall in line. That's how powerful of a force it is. Now, there's two people in this world, okay? And it's very important that if you're one of these two people, it's best that you identify yourself as one of these groups as quickly as possible for your own sake, okay? You're either the type of person to fall in line and follow somebody else and their vision, their dreams, their goals, and ambitions, and because you cannot have a vision of your own, right? And therefore you'll fall apart without some kind of external order to guide you. Or you're more of the creative spirit, as I would say, somebody who really flourishes when they're on their own, okay? If there is somebody who requires order in their life, doesn't recognize the fact that they're also that orderly types of person that needs that group to keep them in line, if they don't recognize that fact and they lie to themselves about that fact, that this order is bad for them, they will fall apart. They will do really terrible things. They will get into drugs, alcohol, substance abuses, and just do, overall degenerate things, go to late night parties and just have absolutely no restraint. Is because, again, they're lying to themselves about that order. By that same token, if a creative person thinks he's going to fit in the military and take shit from a DI boot camp officer, or a DI, you're only coping to yourself that you're going to fit in that society. You flourish in solitude. Two types of people in this world. And I've never seen really... Some people can go between the two, right? And that's totally fine, all that sort of stuff. But there are two types of people in this world. But if you lie to yourself on who you really are, and that's kind of the thing. And one way I kind of identify it by is if your sole goal is to just settle down and have a family. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because, that's a goal for the vast majority of people. But there are also people out there that are creative individuals who want to live on through their own works, their own creation. And so, instead of having kids, they go about doing things in the world that they consider exemplary, that they want to be remembered by. And both are valid paths, right? But a lot of people, when they have kids is because it gives them a reason to live, something to take care of, a purpose beyond what, just satisfying their immediate needs. That's the interesting. This is the entire discussion of this video, is about purpose and what your purpose in this world is. Do you need an external purpose opposed to you? I'll give you another example. I had a friend, okay? When I was in college, he would call me up and he was smoking pot in his closet. And he would say, "Oh man, I miss you, man. We used to hang out so much." And I just kind of thought in the back of my head, I was like, he's working a minimum wage job. And I was like, I don't want to be an asshole and stuff like that, dude. But one of these days, you're going to wake up 50 and wonder where all the years went because you didn't do anything with your life. And eventually he got his act together, He ended up doing something. He brought a modicum of order into his life. He ended up joining the military, which, honestly, that's a point of contention for some people. But it was something that brought a level of order into his life. He even found religion again. And it was funny is because at the time, I had converted him to atheism. But at the same time, I also recognized that without that religious control over him, that kind of idea that there is a higher order, he fell apart. And that was an interesting thing. It is just an interesting aspect of human psychology I have noticed time and time again. It's something that most people don't want to admit. Whenever I hear these little right-wingers talk about this is a spiritual crisis, it's because deep down in their hearts, they're looking to serve something greater, something bigger than themselves, to be a part of something grander. And that's just something that's a part of the human spirit, because we don't want to just be satisfied. A large amount of us want to feel like we're contributing to something greater, whether it be a divine purpose, God, or whatever. We would like to believe that what we're a part of is something special, and it gives us purpose in this world. It's a very powerful force. And, The interesting part is those who can actually understand it and take advantage of it, could use it for great and terrible things. If you can recognize this aspect of human nature, you can motivate people to do great good for the world, or you can motivate them to do terrible things, all in the name of some collective good that people are serving. Some people have abused it, some people have used it for genuine good, but this part of aspect of humanity does exist, and a lot of people like to pretend it doesn't exist. But, again, if you're watching my channel, you're watching my channel not because you want to hear what you've already been told. You want to hear a different perspective. You can walk away anytime. You don't have to watch any of my stuff. You can just kind of brush it off and go to one of those normie YouTubers, like those mainstream media outlets when they talk about the cost of living crisis and they gaslight you with the same old tired talking points that, oh, it's because we don't have enough immigration, or it's that, people have it too nice and that's the reason they're not having kids, right? You can go to the cope talking points, or you can listen to the truth. We all have the choice at the end of the day. And so, it's just interesting food for thought. You don't have to agree with me. This is just me kind of ranting into a microphone, is because these are things I've noticed about people. It's just the tendency for the need to just submit and fall in line to something greater than themselves. And again, use that for good or evil, but, a lot of people are like that. I've seen it time and time again. For, my friend, he's a good friend and all that sorts of stuff, right? But he will literally fall apart if he didn't have an external order upon his life. And that's a lot of people. A lot of people would call them normies. Normies. And a lot of people can get mad at this fact that normies are just meant to fall in line. But that's okay. Like, everyone complains about it. All the alt-right talks about how the normies are like the social enforcers of like the current culture. Yeah, that's 90% of people. That's just life. Most people cannot think for themselves. They must be told what to do. And I'm okay with that. That's just the nature of reality. The same people who get mad at normies for looking at superficial politics and propaganda on the screen and what they say, that's just human nature. People are naturally just that way. They're not endlessly stupid. They have some level of reason, but, people are just that way. They just want an easy to understand narrative that they can kind of just parrot and just fall in line. As even the people who are like super pro-democracy horizontalists, saying that everybody needs to have an equal opinion on everything. No, not everybody needs to have an equal opinion. One of the reasons why I walked away from like the broader left and started, engaging in class politics on my own terms was the failure of the left to recognize these sorts of things. They were more concerned about the politics of formal systems than they were on making meaningful outcomes for ordinary people. And I always hated it. They were always so busy trying to ensure that everyone had an equal amount of speaking time and everyone had an equal amount of, ability to voice their opinions, rather than asking, maybe some opinions are better than others, and some opinions are more useful to others. Some are going to yield better results for others and the group as a whole. And those are the ones that we need to put at the forefront. It's that simple. So again, I'm just the guy who walked away because of that fact. And started giving off my own 2 cents, is because, again, I just refused to fall in line. I'm a part of the creative spirit class. I've noticed that. I'm not the kind of person to just fall in line and take orders. If you want me to do that, I'm not very good at that. Even if I try to do that and kiss your ass, I'm not very good at it. I'm going to say something that's going to piss you off, and you're just going to, like, get really angry that I'm just not falling in line and towing the line, okay? But that's the nature of reality. There are 2 types of people in this world. There are the creative types, and they're the ones that have to fall in line. And some people just need to fall in line. A lot of the creative types, the autists, if you want to call them, get very angry at the normies for just doing this sort of stuff. But again, it's like, they're not capable of doing a lot of things for themselves. They quite literally just need to fall in line and follow a greater order than themselves. But, that's just my 2 cents. My advice to you is that if you're part of the orderly category and you're not a part of the creative spirit, and you need some kind of external thing to care about to give you purpose in life, it's best to recognize that as early as possible and understand that fact. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's no shame in that. That's just because you're an ordinary person, right? Some people have, bigger visions, bigger goals, bigger, things that they want to achieve in life. Maybe they want to be an artist, a musician, a scientist, a painter. It doesn't really matter, right? But they have a clearly defined vision of what they want to do out of life. And so they're going to be fine, is because they're going to find a way to make it work. Maybe they get a job and they use it as a part-time gig to support their own interests. But if you're a part of that category, it's very imperative that you find order in your life. Maybe that be through God. If you need to find God, like I said with my buddy, he was just getting, just smoking pot every weekend in his closet and just didn't want to advance his life. If God is your way to bring order in your life, do it. Honestly. If that's what gives you purpose and gets you up in the morning and to get you through life, then do it. I support it. That's why I'm not even so hostile in religion these days, because I recognize religion was the order for a lot of people. And so, you know, if God is that order for you, then so be it. It was the order for my friend. And that's what kept him in line. That's what kept him, you know, doing the right thing and not falling into drugs and just absolute degeneracy. And it's just, you know, I don't mean to say that as like a scoffing term, like, oh, I have you in a contemptuous view. No, it's just the fact is you will quite literally just fall apart if you don't have some kind of order in your life. It's that simple. But nonetheless, I think I've reached the end of this video. I'm getting close to about the 15-minute mark, or I'm actually at the 15-minute mark, and I think I've made my point. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You know, again, this is just another food for your thought kind of video, and, you know, feel free to engage in the ideas and leave a comment. What do you think? Do you think some people are capable for thinking their own, or do you think some people, you know, quite literally just need to have an external order upon their lives and just be told what to do? From my experience, the latter's existed, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people just need it. All right, y'all have a good day.